3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. End of test.
Okay, this is James Ockenden with Space Tech Finance, and I'm here at Angelflow in Hong Kong. I'm here with Sean Greenhalgh, who's the CEO of Angelflow, and TJ Yen, who's the investment manager and operations at Angelflow. And Angelflow has just put a placement into SpaceX, which is very interesting because it's allowed investors in Hong Kong and the region to have a direct access into SpaceX, and we thought we'd come and talk to you about that. So Sean, can you just kick us off and tell us how did this come about?
Yeah, so one of our things that we tried to get happening at Angelflow is we wanted to democratize early stage investing and give people access to private deals, which, you know, typically you'd have a private banker who would have a minimum check size of $1 million for some of these deals, whether it's secondary or primary. But we thought that that was way too high, especially for people who are just starting to get into investing and are new into private markets. So we thought, hey, we're doing some early stage startup deals, but to kind of get people a little bit more into investing and understanding about like these sorts of investments was to do something with a slightly larger name. So we started thinking about the idea of doing secondaries, and that would have been for a large, well-known company. So we tapped a friend on our shoulder who has lots of access to secondaries in the US, and it was basically between SpaceX and OpenAI. And even though I'm very big into AI and like that sort of space, I've always had a soft spot for space and SpaceX. But primarily, I kind of like looked at the two companies, and AI is in such a interesting place right now that it's really hard to find a winner. But SpaceX has been so far ahead of the curve that we decided, yeah, this is not only a company that we like, but a really great investment. So we started going out to our syndicate members and saying, hey, we're considering doing a secondary deal on SpaceX. But one of our other co-founders actually had an ex-colleague who is part of a VC firm who was investing into a primary round, which Elon decided to do for SpaceX. And it meant that instead of doing a secondary where we'd be buying shares off other investors, typically at a higher price, it meant we invested alongside some primary investors and got primary access to the shares, which meant that it was at a much better valuation, much better price, and it was just great time for everyone.
Yeah. So how many syndicate members have you got just to for this deal?
Oh gosh, how many do we have?
We've got close to 100 at the moment, so just shy of that. Yeah.
And I think it was about 29, 27, 29?
Roughly that,
yeah. In this deal.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, so it was just a hair under $500,000 US that of allocation that we managed to put together.
Yeah. So we're talking relatively smaller sort of retail investors here, or these are sort of more experienced investors in your syndicate?
Well, because of the way that syndicates work and the rules and regulations, everybody has to be a professional investor to be able to invest in these sorts of deals. But it's kind of looking more towards the size of what a retail investor would invest in, because even if you're a professional investor, sometimes, you know, the allocations that were available to them, especially in the secondaries market of like minimum check sizes of $1 million US is a lot higher than even most professional investors would, early stage professional investors would do. So that's why we split that one up and managed to get it into smaller check sizes of 10,000 US each, which meant that it was a lot more palatable, and it was a nice, good entry point for people who wanted to start investing in this space.
Yeah, and how many of those members were, because you talked about space, you know, versus AI, obviously there's a glamour to the space side. How many are just drawn into that, or, you know, compared to the actual fundamentals of the investment?
Oh gosh, talking about the fundamentals, I think TJ's better one to answer this one, but I'm a big space nerd, and I've always liked SpaceX. But just aside from that one, it was just a great investment as well.
Yeah, so I think in terms of, if you look at where SpaceX is at, if you look at sort of a lot of the public commentary that's out there at the moment, they're probably going to do about 15 billion or so this year. Next year, they're projected to do 26 in that range. And so it made sense from, I guess, a valuation standpoint of where we got in. My understanding is that secondary market's now trading probably about 10% above what the current round is at. And so it was fortunate for us that we were able to come into this round at the price that we did there. So, I think if you look at SpaceX, they virtually have a hand lock on launch services in the United States. A lot of other markets also rely upon them for rideshare as well. There's only a handful of nations on the planet that actually can do launch end-to-end. So you talk about United States, Russia, China, possibly to a small extent India. And so there is a big reliance upon that. I think SpaceX probably accounts for at least 60 or 70% of launch services in the United States. Plus you have Starlink on top of that as well. And they're bringing on more and more markets on all the time. And so when you look at the total addressable market that they're looking at, it's going to be anywhere between, half the world's population plus. And so when you look at both where they're at and also the market opportunity that they have and their market positioning, it stands to be a promising opportunity to actually go into SpaceX there.
Yeah. I was actually surprised Starlink announced it had 7 million customers, which I thought was actually a lot lower than expected, given I've seen it in a field in Dorset in the middle of nowhere at a socialist festival, which is kind of anti-Elon and anti-SpaceX, but there's this guy with a Starlink terminal on his van, and I actually asked him about it, and he was very defensive. He was like, "It works great, just go away."
Well, it's an amazing service. I almost used it to replace the national broadband network connection I had in Sydney when I was living there, because.
Right.
Weirdly, the connection that was coming into our building was actually slower than the typical connection you could get on Starlink.
Yeah.
And although it meant that I'd have to do some sort of crazy attachment to the satellite, it would have worked better in terms of that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of two sides of this business which are amazing, and I'm very much a space nerd. It's like I watched the first time that NASA launched their astronauts with a commercial entity, which was with SpaceX, and I've even got the zero-G indicator, the little plush toy that they used on that one, the shiny little dinosaur.
Yeah.
I've got that one. My wife bought that one, so we've got several of them at home because she was trying to get one for me as a surprise. But even looking back at my past, I've always kind of loved the whole space exploration side of things. But for me, I even years and years ago worked with a company, well, not worked with a company, but helped out a company that was in an accelerator program with me that ended up sending a Raspberry Pi onto the International Space Station. Although that didn't go on a SpaceX rocket, it was supposed to. But I can happily say, I've at least had a little bit of an impact in putting something into space. So that's kind of makes me all nerdy and happy about space exploration and SpaceX and all these companies.
Yeah. TJ, similar views on space, or are you just a hard numbers man?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you look at SpaceX's mission, it's really around sort of bringing down the cost of launch and making space a lot more accessible there. They're already doing that. I think the long-term ambition is to be able to deliver a payload somewhere in the range of $5 to $10 million US. And if they can do that over the next decade or so, it's going to create sort of tremendous amounts of opportunities, not just for space itself, but sort of any adjacent sort of space-related industries there. So we're talking everything from new types of satellites, spectral imaging. A whole variety of different industries are starting to spring up now already, just because the unit cost of getting into space is coming down there.
Yeah.
I personally have invested in space for a little while now, so looked at a range of different companies, everything from propulsion systems, space mobility, space communications, different types of imaging, and of course the nuts and bolts of it, things like advanced materials, so heat shielding. Type companies that are just trying to make it easier for us to send stuff into space and make it more reusable as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a big question is, it's not just the big names. There's behind SpaceX, there's hundreds of small engineering companies that no one's ever heard of, probably making transmitters and like you say, all sorts of components. So is that a good bet to get into the space investment?
I think it's an early bet. I think time will tell around that.
Yeah.
But we are seeing the growth in the sector there. As with any sort of venture style deal, you're really sort of making a calculated bet that a handful of companies can become sort of market winners there. I guess to put that into perspective, I was quoted a stat once where there's probably about 1 in 15 or so space companies succeed, and the ones that do sort of overperform there. And so it's really sort of taking a long-term view around what are the types of industries that could be built and grown from today, and how's this going to be relevant in the sort of the next 10 years there. Things I probably tend to steer clear of is, things that are a bit more science fiction in nature, so things like asteroid mining and all that type of stuff. I'm sure it will take place, but maybe not in our lifetimes there.
Right.
Where it's going to become, big scalable businesses.
Oh, even the physics of that one, like, even boggles my mind. It's like having to try and literally thread a needle in space. Like, it's just something that it's incredibly hard to do.
Yeah, a lot has to go right between now and then, and then you have to prove that there's a real business there, and then it's scalable then. So.
Yeah. So that 1 in 15 is very interesting. Would you say that's across all the sectors? So in propulsion, 1 in 15, or are there sort of sectors where there are clear standout, choices?
Well, there's a whole bunch of launch companies at the moment that are up and coming. Obviously, SpaceX stands out, but there are sort of other sort of areas as well. So advanced materials, there are different companies doing propulsion systems there. There are different companies doing different types of imaging or different types of communications there. And so, it is sort of looking at the sector and going, where's the scale and the opportunity going to be? Is it coming at the right price? But also, what is the traction of those companies, and what's the background of the founders there? So you're looking at sort of a broad range of factors and trying to sort of make a bet or make a guess as to who do you think is going to succeed there.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I think democratizing access to space is something that SpaceX and many of the other companies are trying to do. So it does almost create another whole vertical for space startups, because it means that if you can design, there's so many microsats and CubeSat companies that are popping up now. It's like that would have been impossible to have in the past with the price of how much it actually costs to get a payload into space. But now the fact that they can do it at a much lower price means that it suddenly becomes more palatable, and it means that smaller companies can do it than before. It used to be the large companies were the only ones who could do satellites into space, and if it's not the large companies like Lockheed Martin and those companies, then it's the governments. But now you can send a small CubeSat into space. I think it was a New Zealand company or an Australian company was sending lots of CubeSats, and I think they were, because they do one launch with multiple satellites, it actually brought the price down to almost single digits millions, I think, into space, if I recall the numbers properly. But it's just the fact that with the access to space, bringing down the price to put something into space means that it does create a whole nother industry that wasn't there previously.
Yeah. So back to Angelflow, and so what are you doing to educate investors about the sector?
Oh, that's an interesting one, because at the moment we're spending a lot of time trying to educate investors about early stage investing, or even investing into private markets, because lots of people have experience when it comes to stock market or or in the areas of business that they've made their money. Sometimes it's manufacturing. Quite often here in Hong Kong it's property. And just trying to explain how things are different in this space, especially when it talks about, you're going to be making an investment that won't have any exit until at least 5 to 10 years. People are expecting to be able to liquidate their positions, which isn't really what you do or what you want to do. in private markets investing. I mean, there's always secondaries and things like that you can do, but like it's not really up to you as much as it's up to fund managers or the company itself. But there's quite a lot of different events that are talking about space and space tech. I mean, TJ's invited me to a couple, which unfortunately I haven't been to just yet. But it does seem like there's people who are interested in private investing as well as in space tech. And then there are people like yourself who are kind of like creating that intersection between them to help educate people and open up the market so that they understand a little bit more about what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, fundamentally it comes down to this. It's creating more opportunities for people to get access. And number two, you're right, it's about sort of broadening the range of education, whether it's, space tech or AI, whether it's sort of robotics, all those types of things. I think that people are broadly interested in these sectors. But it comes down to the fact that there hasn't really been a way for them to get access previously. As Sean mentioned, the traditional way is to go through a private banker where the ticket sizes tend to be much higher. And you really need those pre-existing relationships to actually even know that these things are possible. And so really our goal is to make these sectors a lot more accessible for people, both on just getting in the first place, but also understanding what's available out there and what are some of those opportunities.
Yeah, there's three things that we say we're trying to do at Angelflow, and it's democratizing the investment, but it's by giving deal access, because quite often with these sorts of deals, as we said, it was my co-founder Rob who had a previous relationship with a VC that actually gave us access to the deal. So it's like this isn't something that most normal people would have just available to them. The other side of things is expertise. Like I might know the technical side of things and be the space rocketing nerd, like when it comes to actually wanting to do the deal for SpaceX. But when it comes down to the raw numbers and trying to find out if it is a good investment and if the allocation that we have is good, I turn to TJ, who can do the technical analysis on that one. And the third one, which we've mentioned a couple of times, is the check size, because one of the best ways in early stage investing to make sure that you de-risk your portfolio is by diversification. So at Angelflow, what we're trying to do is we're helping people put together syndicates or angel clubs. So it means that instead of, if you were to put in $100,000 into startups or into private companies in 1 year, it's like instead of doing $100,000, putting it into one and potentially losing it all, means that you get together 9 other friends, put together your own investment club, and do $10,000 across 10 investments, means you're still doing $100,000, but you have a higher chance of playing that portfolio game and getting into the Powers Law, the same thing that VCs and other investors have known for years and years. And that's the thing we're trying to do. We're trying to empower. We did a deal on space, but there's going to certainly be other people in different areas which want to run a syndicate of their own and have access to different deals. But for us, it was just a happy thing that we looked at SpaceX and realized that was something internally that we all loved.
Yeah. So that came up. I think I met you, the first time I met you was probably the day after you'd closed that deal and you hadn't slept for a week because you'd been on US time. And so literally, so it was because of a connection that you had through the secondary market that...
Well, initially it was through the secondary market, but while we were actually doing it, we had a better allocation in the primary market. And that was from connections between a VC who was putting in a much larger check size than we were going to do, but quite often these VCs would allow other investors to come alongside them if they can organize things and put things together, as long as you actually have the connection and the relationships with them. So we would have been doing what would have been called a co-investment into this deal. So their main fund would have put in the lion's share of the investment, and then smaller investors who wanted to invest smaller amounts, or when I say smaller amounts, still talking the millions of dollars into this one. But for us, they gave us an allocation that we could invest alongside. So it allowed us, I think initially said we were going to look at a $200,000 investment. And then it's just because of the terms and because of the outreach that we did, suddenly people got really excited and we doubled that quite quickly.
Yeah. Are they people in Hong Kong?
They're actually people worldwide. I think most of them were in Hong Kong, but the thing is that some of them were in Canada and the US as well, because it's just one of these things where deal access is probably the hardest part of most of these things, and it's kind of like trying to find who has the best deal access to these investments.
Yeah. Did this make any noise in Hong Kong at all? Was there any sort of local media interested in this, or financial press here?
Well, because of the way and the nature of these sorts of investments, the way that we actually can publicize it is very tight with the SFC regulations and things like that, because these are still private market deals and it's not retail investors and it's professional investors only. We have to first make sure that people join our syndicate before we can actually tell them our deal details, because it is very much a private market deal. Have to make sure it's professional investor only, and we're not doing public solicitation. And the other side of things is we're working with a fund manager in the US who kind of like is underwriting the structure itself, just so that we make sure that we're all compliant and we're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah, okay. So exit for SpaceX, what's that going to look like?
Oh, I have my thoughts.
I think our broad plan is to hold things to some sort of liquidity event, so hopefully some sort of IPO, but ultimately that will depend upon SpaceX and their management there. So, but I think everyone has a broadly are bullish about SpaceX in the long term there. So our expectation is to hold it and hopefully have an exit in the future.
Yeah, you have a time frame at all?
I think for us, it's going to be at least 5 years or so. Yeah. But again, if we look at where the space is, it very much is a long-term game there. So like it is in any sort of venture capital sort of deal there. We're fortunate that it is a late-stage deal, and so liquidity options tend to be more apparent. But with something like this company there, it's ultimately going to come down to where their management sits and what their long-term views are.
Yeah, and my thoughts are exactly the same. I think it's going to be at least a 5-year. I mean, there are potential options to exit earlier if we think that there's good value on the table through secondaries. Yeah. But I personally think that it's the best idea to stay until IPO. The other option that I kind of see that is a potential that might happen, and this is just kind of looking at less the numbers and metrics, more just about the technology in the background, is the fact that SpaceX itself might split from Starlink, because Starlink is kind of like its own satellite service, and the way that it actually needs to interact with different governments and helping them with the rural internet and stuff like that. So there might be a bifurcation in the company where that one becomes a separate entity, which would be a minor win and a early liquidity event. But the idea for all of us is we're going to hold the course until IPO.
Yeah. Would you stay in Starlink or the launch?
Oh, that's the beautiful thing about this one, is the fact that if it does split into two, it means that it's a most likely case where our shares in SpaceX would end up becoming shares in SpaceX and the new entity, because it does split that sort of way. Right. So it means that then, considering that we've done it before, that bifurcation would mean that we're going to become investors in both of them. And both companies, I think, are great and standalone businesses, but my favorite part is the launch business. But that's, as I said, more into the fact that I like rockets and the engineering behind space in itself.
Yeah. It was a good week last week, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. Seeing...
we were up every morning with the kids, and they have to go to school just before the launch on Monday, and then Tuesday, and then...
yes, yeah. IFE 10 splashdown.
Yes.
Properly.
Incredible.
Apparently they're going to do the chopsticks catch the next one, or they're going to attempt that one, which will be absolutely fantastic.
Can't wait. Yeah. Okay. So now you've done one primary. Do you think if there's another round, you'll have better access, or?
Yeah, I think the fact that we actually have access through this one, and now we have some of the connections, means that if they do another round, we might be able to syndicate that one as well, and maybe have the people who invested in this one and some extras be able to join us for the ride. But the future is the future, and we can't be able to tell that one directly off. So,
would you look for another secondary round now you've done a primary, or?
If the secondary was at the right valuation, maybe we would. But the thing is that when it comes down to it, it's like we have to look at every deal on a deal per deal basis, which is the way that you do things with a syndicate. And if we see a good enough deal, then we do put it out to our members, because at the end of the day, everyone still has final say on their capital allocation, unlike a fund where it's like we're investing on their behalf. Yeah. This way that we do the investments means that people get to say not only if they want to join the deal, but how much they want to invest into it in each deal and a deal per deal basis.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that covers everything. Anything to add?
No, but thank you for this opportunity to talk and stuff. Like Sean said, our mission is really to make it much more accessible for people to get access to these types of opportunities there. Looking forward to being able to share our next deal.
Yeah, so apart from anything else, I think one of the nice things I just saw the other day from SpaceX was having a look at how many times in the last year rockets were sent into space and how many times they were returned. And I think SpaceX is the only one who's actually reusing their rockets, which is an absolutely fantastic thing. But for us at Angelflow, if you're interested in getting into not only investments in space, but if you're looking at the whole startup investing scene and looking at early stage investing, then please get in touch with us at Angelflow. It's if you're a startup as well, doesn't have to be a space startup. We do all sorts of startups, but if you're looking to put together an investment syndicate, or if you're looking to get deal access to private markets to expand your portfolio, then we'd love to hear from you.
Great stuff. Sean, TJ, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
各位都好吧，我们都很想念你们，有空请到这儿来玩。